Hi everyone. Well, this was a good assignment. There were lots and lots of good questions. I just checked my email and I had about 6 emails from different people asking about different things for the gradebook, and that's awesome. I'm really happy that you guys are trying it. I'm really happy that you're putting different ideas. I've had a couple people email me, and then I get another email saying, "Oh, I started going a different direction," and that's good. I mean, that's exactly what computer programming is all about, finding different solutions. And so I love the way you're going about your business. Keep it up. Um, what I want to do is I want to show my program to you. Now, some of you are not done and you're still kind of in the midst of doing this, and you may not want to know some things. So feel free to skip through this video, skip around this video. If you need a hint, you can kind of go to a section in the video, but don't feel like you have to watch the whole thing and kind of see it all. If you are still doing this and if you're stubborn like me and you kind of like to get it on your own or maybe get a hint and go from there, then use this video for that. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through my program and show you how it works. So biggest thing about this program is that you have to use a two-dimensional array, and I had a couple emails from people kind of saying, well, could we use an array list? And yeah, you can, but this assignment wants you to use an array, and that's kind of the point, is to see how an array works. And in reality, using an array for this is better, and the reason it's better is because an array list takes up more resources. Every time you make an object or a variable, it takes up resources in the computer's memory. Now, for our simple little programs, that's not a big deal, but we are trying to, this is a high school course, we're doing simple little programs, but we're training you for, possibly a career, and, you want to write your code as efficiently as possible. An array is much more efficient memory-wise than an array list. And so if I know that my gradebook can only handle up to 15 students, never, ever, ever anymore, and I also know that there's only ever going to be 4 tests and never, ever, ever anymore, there's no point in creating something that's going to be dynamic, meaning it's going to change, because I know this is not going to change, and there's no point in creating an array list that's going to take up more memory. Okay, that being said, one of the challenges, how do you know how many students are going to be in the array? Because when you create the array, you're creating a 15 by 4 grid, and it starts out with it's just empty. It's filled with nothing. And so yes, when you add a student and then you want to list a student, you have 1 student in the array, but you don't want to list 15. There's not 15 there. So the first challenge is, how do you tell the computer or the program that there's only 1 student? And there's a couple different ways to do it, and please keep that in mind as we go through. My way is not the way, my way is one way, and you may have done it a different way, and if it works, that's fantastic. All right, let's take a look at the source. And I've tried to model, good programming behavior. Look up top, I've got my name, I've got the date, and I've got a little, okay, this is what my program's going to do. I hope that you've all done the same, and you can see comments through my code. And before every single little thing I do, I've got a little description of what the method is going to do. So first thing I want to look for is init components. There it is. And so notice that I've added something to init components called init grades. And so this is a method because it's got these brackets here. And so hopefully you're curious as to, what does this do? And I've got a little comment here saying set all grades to -1, indicating no data. Okay, well, let's go have a look at this. And so I'm going to, I thought I could double click on it and go straight to the method. That's what I was doing there. I thought there was a way to do that. I'm sure there is a way to do that, and I can't find it right now. But, navigate, maybe. Yeah, go to declaration. There we are. And it takes me right to init grades. So init grades is a method that I wrote, and what it does is it goes through the array, my array that I called R grades, array of grades, and it sets all of the spots in the array to -1. Now, nice thing about arrays is that I can kind of show them to you in a spreadsheet. And what I've really done is, imagine I had 15 different columns and I've got 4 rows. or vice versa, however you structured it, and I've put a -1 in basically a 15 by 4 grid, like that. So this is called initializing the array, and I've initialized it so that all the spots are -1. Why did I choose -1? Because you can't get -1 on a test unless you really try hard. So -1, from the purposes of my program, indicates there's no data in this spot. And you're going to see where that comes in a little bit later. Okay? So let's start here. We'll start with the add. Okay, so I double click here. It takes me into the code. Another method that I made called getInfo. So I navigate to getInfo. And getInfo does exactly what it sounds like. It gets the information from the user and puts it into the appropriate variables. So I have a variable called T1, test1, T2, test2, and so on, last name, first name. And so I'm just getting the stuff from the GUI and putting it in the appropriate variables. Why did I put that in a method? Just because it looks a little bit cleaner, and I felt like it. Could I have put it up in the button? Yeah, I could have, but again, I could see a situation where you would need getInfo with another button, and so I thought I'll make a method. Not the end of the world if you didn't, but good programming practice shown by me. So what I do then is I immediately put the variables, so test1, test2, test3, test4, I assign those to the array. Now, the 0th spot is test1. The first spot is test2. The second spot is test3, and the third spot is test4. Now, what's name count all about? You see name count down here too. Let's go up a little bit. Here's name count. And name count is a variable that I start at 0, and it does exactly what you think it does. It counts the names. So every time I put a student into the database, that variable goes up by 1. The fact that it starts at 0 means that when I run my program the first time, it's going to be the 0th student. And then the next one's going to be the first student. But don't forget, Java starts its arrays at 0, not at 1. And so that's going to be a little difference between our human English and what we are going to program. So the first time I run this into spot 0, 0, we'll go test1, 0, 0, we'll test2, and then the next student will be 1, 0, 1, 2. And so for the way I've written this, this dimension, my first dimension, is the student. This one goes up to 15. And this is the test, and this will go up to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So the grades go into the grades array. And then some of you had questions about how you handle the student name, and that was a good question. You have an array, a two-dimensional array of integer or double or whatever you did, but names are not numbers, and so you can't store the student name in the array of numbers. You need to have another container. So what I did is I created one more array that is going to be a string array, and it will hold the name of the student. So it's going to be a string array of 15 things, and it's going to correspond to the array of grades. So when someone puts in the name, the grades go into the grades array, and the name is simply glued together and goes into the names array. Okay? And then because I'm a user-friendly programmer, I set my text to say, okay, whoever, this is the name of the person, they have been added successfully, and then I add to the name counter, because next time I go through, I want to add to the first row, not the 0th row. Okay? So that's my add button, and basically it's just putting stuff into arrays. Hopefully so far so good. Let's go to list all. So I'm going to go to my list all array button. Sorry, not array, button. So here we go. This is my list all. What I do first is I create a blank string. So there's nothing in that string at all. And what I want to do is I'm going to have a double for loop. So this is what we call a nested for loop. A nested means that there's one inside of another. You could have nested for loops, you can have nested if statements, you can have nested all kinds of different things. But what I do is I say, okay, I'm going to go from X is going to go from 0 to 15, and that goes through the students. Now, this is the interesting part, and this is the way I solved the problem of not asking for data that wasn't there. What I'm saying here is, if you look at the xth row and you find a -1, we do not want to keep reading data. So we don't want to read data for students that do not exist, is basically what that's saying. And that, again, that's one way to do it. You may have thought of a different way, and you might be sitting there going, geez, my way is way better than that. And you might be right. But this is the way I did it, and I like it. And if you don't, I don't care. So if there is not -1, there's a double negative for you, but if there's not -1, that means there are legitimate grades in there. And so we want to continue on and go and get those grades to list them. So I take my message and I add the name that is in the xth spot and then a hyphen. And now I'm going to go through the array, and I'm going to get all of the different grades. So this is the equivalent of me going, oh, I found John Swaine, and I'm going to go get his grades, which are obviously extremely high. Sure. And so the first time through the loop, it would get the 90, the next time the 90, the next time the 93, and then the last one it would get would be 99, and then John Swaine would be done, and it would move on to the next student if there is one. Something a little bit weird, just a little bit weird, is notice that I have this line down here. Sorry, I got to make this. I was fooling around with this before I programmed. There we go. Notice my loop goes from 0 to 3 right here, but there's 4 things in the array that I want to get. The reason I do that is because every time I go through this loop, what I do is I add t, meaning test, and then the number. So the 0th time through the loop, it's going to say test 1, colon, and then I report the grade, and then a slash. And the slash is there because I want to separate the tests. And so that's how I display it in the loop, but I don't display the last one because the last one, I don't want the slash there, and in fact at the end I want a new line character. So when I run this, what it's going to do is it's going to go get all the grades and it's going to report them onto the screen. And the reason this is outside the loop is because I don't want the slash at the end of the sentence, and so I don't want the last one to be part of the loop. So that's why I put it outside the loop. So I report test score, well, again, just with numbers, I guess I'll report test score 0, 1, 2, and then I break out of the loop and I get score 3 so that I can report it in a slightly different way, not including that slash. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a little bit different there. And again, if you don't get it, use breakpoints and you can actually pause the program and see what's going on. So that's the list button. And now let's go to the test average, I guess. So the test average button. The test average button, what I do is I calculate the average on each test. Now think about that. The way that looks in my program, or in my head anyway, is that each test is a column, right? If I want to know that the average on test 3, really what I want to know is the average of all of these numbers. Whereas when I do the students, if I want to know the average for each student, I want to know the average of each of the rows. So it's different dimensions that you're working with. So for this one, I've created this integer array called sums, and you're going to see why this comes in handy in a minute. And just like I did before, I'm going to go through all 15 students, and I'm going to make sure that there is data, and then I'm going to go through the tests. And what I do is I'm going to add, when I say add, I mean mathematically add the test scores together for the yth test over and over again. So if you think about that, I'm going to get the 0th test score for John Swaine, and I'm going to start a sum. And then I'm going to get the first test score for John Swaine, and I'm going to start a sum, and then the second and the third. And then I move on to the next person in the database, and I get their score, and I add it to John Swaine's score for test 0. And then the same for test 1, and the same for test 2, and the same for test 3. So this loop continually builds the test scores, and it adds the test scores together by test, by student for each test. So when I'm done, I will have the sum of all of the marks. So just, again, to see that, I need to put in a little bit more data here. Bear with me. If I have, say, 3 students in my database, what that does is the sums array would be the sum of those. That would be in the 0 spot. This would be in the first spot, second spot, third spot. So the sum takes the score of all the tests. Okay, so test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4. This would be sum 0, sums 1, sums 2, sums 3. And then once I have those sums, to get the average, once I've got all the students completed, I'm going to go through each test, so from 0 to 4, and I say test 1 average, and then I take the sum, I divide it by the name count, that's how many students are in my database, and that will not change because I don't have a delete button. And I round it and I display. That's it. And then I'll go straight to the student, because the student, and some of you asked me, by the way, do we have to comment every single part of our program? And the answer is no. For example, what I'm going to show you right now with the student average, it's the exact same thing, except now we're not calculating, my visual here, we're not calculating going down, we'd be calculating going over. So John Swaine's average would be 90 plus 90 plus 93 plus 99 divided by 3, or 4, sorry, 4. But the mechanics of it are exactly the same. So I go through the students, I make sure there's data, I go through all the tests, I have the sums now, but notice I'm going in the X dimension, and I'm adding up the grades, and I'm doing the same thing. That's it. So let's run this bad boy, and I'll prove to you that my logic is not faulty. Alright, so I'll put myself in the database, and I'll get a 90, and a 92, and a 94, and the 50. That last test was hard. Add it, okay, and I've been added, and then I'll add Wayne Gretzky. That's my go-to, because he's my hero. He got a 50 because he was concentrating on hockey, you know, that's why. And got a little better. And then on that last test, he got a 99 too. So add that. And so if I list all, there you go. You can see all the different tests. So if you look at this, just so we can make sure this works, test 1, I got a 90, Gretzky got a 50. And so test 1 average should be 70, if I've done my math correctly. So if I hit test averages, yep, there we go. That seems to be working. And list them all one more time. Take a look at the student average. So I don't know this off the top of my head, but if Gretzky got a 50, 60, 70, his average is probably going to be somewhere around 75. I don't know. No, 69. I think that looks reasonable. I should have picked better numbers, as I show off the fact that I can't do math in my head quickly while I talk to a computer. So if I list all again, 90, 92, yeah, 81 looks reasonable. So I think the averages are working, and I know they're working. So there you go. So, I don't know why I have an equal sign there. That should go away. But other than that, I think this is pretty rock solid. So I'm hoping that that helps you. I'm not going to post the code yet. I will post the code later if you're still having trouble, but I'd like you to try to finish it up now that you've seen all this stuff. And you can pause the video anywhere you want to see different parts of my code as I scroll through it. So I'll go through the whole thing, and that way you'll have it all in the video somewhere. Almost done. There we go. So remember, as you're doing this, good commenting, good variable naming, tab indenting, all that stuff, I want to see that. And I hope that this video explained a little bit about the 2 dimensions and how to calculate the averages. So I think what we'll do, I'm going to give you tonight and maybe the morning of tomorrow. And tomorrow afternoon I will post something a little different so we can start moving on. Okay? Good job, everybody. Take care.